The original Dead Space is easily one of the best action survival horror titles and one of my personal favorites as well. It came out at a time where EA wanted to start creating their own properties. With Dead Space, we saw the beginning of something great from Redwood Shores that would later be known as Visceral Games. It was one of those rare titles that felt like it was close to a perfect execution. Horror fans could pick up on all the appreciated influences and intrigued by the new world. I beat this game several times over the years since its release, and I played it again recently. Dead Space holds up considerably well and feels like a huge breath of fresh air when compared to many of the new titles we see today. This was never a game that I thought needed a remake of any kind. I do think it deserved a fourth game. But even so, we now have the remake, and in many ways, I think it's really good, great even in some areas. I'm also conflicted about it when you factor in much of the stuff and how EA treated the original trilogy's run. So let's dive into the remake today. The Dead Space remake is a survival horror title, so most of your time will be spent in combat or even running away from enemies and gathering supplies. Just like in the original, the action is intense and visceral. The tension is really good, and in some ways I appreciated some changes in the remake. For one, the lighting is much darker. This means that those few spots where an enemy would pretend to be dead and then surprise you hits a lot harder because you cannot see them coming at all. The darker lighting helps to create a different feel than the original, and feeds into the tension here. The third-person shooting is really good, but I did have a bunch of issues related to the aiming on the PS5. I'll get into this a bit more later, but after I found settings that worked better, I was enjoying it. Both the sound and impact to the shooting are stellar here. The impact sees a huge upgrade that benefits from the modern engine. Dead Space flips the notion of a headshot or critical hit on its head. Since you would normally go for the head in a game like this, the game actually wants you to go for the limbs here. This creates an entirely unique way to think about your enemies, and with the upgraded engine, the violence is much more detailed, to the point that it is delightfully over-the-top perfect for a video game, along with providing more information to the player. Now you can really see which limbs might be weaker than others, informing you to hit the right arm over a leg, for example. There's plenty of toys to use. The plasma cutter is my go-to and easily ranks as one of the best weapons in the entire medium. Each weapon comes with their own unique alternative fire. The cutter lets you switch from vertical to horizontal shots, great for the limb mechanic. The ripper blades are great for clearing the way with a bunch of enemies surrounding you, or firing off a couple outright, quickly taking out the legs of your enemies. The flamethrower is easily one of my favorites, and it can be used to create firewalls. The force gun is the gun to use if you want to see what the violence in this game can really do. I really like the limb mechanic with the shooting. It subverts the notion of a headshot in a good way and creates this thinking man sort of experience as you assess how to tackle all of your threats. Maybe you go for the legs, slow down your opposition, and get to a better position to handle them. Or maybe you try something else. There's two other important toys. For one, you have access to stasis. This will allow you to slow down enemies, and it's great for many of the survival rooms. Kinesis allows you to pick up objects and is used for some of the puzzles, but you can also pick up blades and explosives to hurl at enemies. Dead Space features plenty of exploring and rewards for all of the nook and crannies that you can see. In many cases, you live and die by your resource management. Enemies will often drop rewards from money to more ammo. Money is used to buy upgrades, health, and ammo. Nodes are used to upgrade your suit and weapons. Now I want to mention some things that I really like specific to the remake. I already mentioned the lighting, but there are new parts where you need to switch where the power is going to get past a spot. So sometimes you might need to turn off the lights to then allow you to open up a door. This feeling of dread is great, and I love how it makes the player do this rather than the game just turning off the lights on their own. The player knows what they need to do, but doesn't want to do it because it will be harder to fight through the area now. Since the ship is interconnected now and not separate levels, you can go back to older rooms, and to help to keep this backtracking interesting, enemies will be waiting for you, but it will all be randomized. So you might backtrack through an old area and see no one, but then you could reload the same save, go to the same spot, and encounter enemies or even be ambushed by them. This meant that no matter what I was doing, I was always on edge. The regenerator parts are just as terrifying as they were in the original. I do like some of the nice touches where the story requires you to backtrack through an area, but when you go back to that area, you can now do it in 0G. This totally changes the space. The turret sections are much better than the original as well. I really enjoyed the second fight a lot more than in the original. The turret sections were the two weakest spots of the original, so I am happy that they improved them here. I think most importantly, all of the developers who worked on anything related to the gameplay really understood what made the original special. Overall, especially from the gameplay side of things, I think the remake is good and great in some areas, but now let's get into some things I have issues with. I really didn't care for any of the story changes. There was some modern writing garbage that we see to some degree in many big titles released now. Much of this stuff and changes from the original honestly did not service the story in any way, and feels more like a way for the writers to check those Twitter boxes. I do not like the new look to the characters. Hammond is a downgrade in every way compared to the original Hammond. Plus, I'm biased. The original guy was great and played a key character in the show Spartacus. Kendra looks worse and Nicole looks like an elderly woman for some reason now. I do like that some of the prior voice actors came back, but the new ones do not match the originals. This is really noticeable with Hammond and Dr. Kyne. I also preferred in the original that Isaac didn't talk. It added to that loneliness feeling of the first and gave it a very unique style. Plus, it was a nice change in 2 to hear him talk there for the first time. The writers got lazy with the remake with some of Isaac's lines, because they gave him some of Hammond's old lines. This in turn, and how they portray Hammond in the remake, makes him way less assertive than he was in the original. If you wanted Isaac to talk, then do the work and come up with all original lines for him. Don't steal from Hammond and then hurt his character. The Metroid-like elements that were sold a lot before this game came out, with how you can go back to areas of the ship and unlock new ones, the execution here doesn't really meet the sales pitch. There are a good handful of times where you need to go back and do this, and I wish this was played up more and elaborated on in this game. The side missions are fine, but gameplay-wise, they don't really add anything here. You mainly go to a spot and just watch a cutscene. This is a nitpick, but I preferred in the original that you had to pay to buy for new weapons. You would find their plans, but then need to decide to spend the actual credits to use them. In the remake, you're just given them. I also had a fair amount of glitches as well. There would be times where Isaac would be shaking oddly. I had a glitch where a boss did not want to attack me. There was another time where an enemy was stuck in a wall, and on New Game Plus, the NPCs would not do their actions, so I was stuck. Nothing game-breaking, but these things hurt the flow of the game when they popped up. Lastly, I need to bring up the aiming controls. The remake has a lot of control options to tweak many things, which is nice, but you need more control over the aiming. There is a form of aiming acceleration here, and it really threw me off, to the point that I was confused why this was the default control scheme. Those are what you experience first, and they were objectively bad here. Here are the settings I use, so you can copy mine if you're looking for a place to start to make it better. Now, I had some people say that they like the default controls, and mouse and keyboard doesn't seem to have those issues. So as it pertains to me, just let me know if you experience what I had. If I look at the Dead Space remake as what the game provides, overall I really like it. But when I factor in all the stuff around the game, that is where I start to feel conflicted. So the original trilogy was made by Visceral Games. EA poorly managed these games. They forced odd DLC items and continually would state how they failed sales expectations, because EA was trying to make Dead Space into something that I do not think was fair to the IP. Horror is a niche, and Resident Evil's mass appeal is very rare. While Dead Space deserves that attention, it is unrealistic to expect that it would be at the levels of Resident Evil's mass appeal right from 3 games. Ultimately, EA canned the developer as well and shelved any chance at this continuing until now. Now we have a remake made by a new internal EA team, and it's getting all of the praise. It sort of feels like EA is having its cake and eating it too. This remake is what will be pushed to the forefront when the company wants to present Dead Space. And while I enjoyed the remake, in many ways this erases all the work the original developers did in favor of the remake. At the same time, these new developers understood what made Dead Space special. If I had control of this project, I would have remastered the trilogy and focused the remake's attention on an actual 4th game that had several callbacks to the original. This might sound like I'm all over the place with with this remake, and this is why I'm so conflicted. It is very fun and feels kind of scummy at the same time, because while I say the remake is good, at the same time when I say that it's good, it's also kind of rewarding EA's bad mismanagement. What were your thoughts on the remake? Did you play the original, or was this the first time with Dead Space? Let me know in the comments below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.